Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. Today we're diving deep into something that I think we all grapple with, valuing our time and how that's intertwined with self-respect.
Such a rich topic.
Yeah.
The sources you've gathered really emphasize that connection, like they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. One of the things that really grabbed my attention was this idea of time as a bank account. Every moment we spend is a withdrawal. It's a powerful analogy, right?
It is. It forces us to think about what we're spending our time on, what kind of return we're getting. Are we investing it wisely, or are we just frittering it away?
So if time is like money, what are some of the bad investments we make? What are the time wasters that drain our accounts without giving much back?
That's a great question. I think it's different for everyone, but there are some common traps.
Yeah.
Mindlessly scrolling social media, for example. We might tell ourselves we're relaxing or connecting, but often it just leaves us feeling empty and drained.
Like we just made a bunch of tiny withdrawals with no real gain.
Exactly. Another common trap is saying yes to things we don't really want to do out of obligation or a fear of missing out. Those are big withdrawals that can leave us feeling resentful and depleted.
So if those are the bad investments, what are the high-yield ways to spend our time? The ones that give us a good return on our investment.
Again, it's personal, but the sources highlight things like pursuing our passions, spending time with loved ones, investing in learning and personal growth, and taking care of our physical and mental health. These are the activities that fill our time accounts with energy, joy, and a sense of accomplishment.
It makes you realize how much power we have, right?
Yeah.
We can choose to invest our time in things that lift us up or things that drain us.
Absolutely. And that's where self-respect comes in. Because when we respect ourselves, we're more likely to make choices that honor our time and energy. We're less likely to let people or activities drain our account without giving anything back.
The sources talk a lot about boundaries, right? That seems to be a key element of respecting our time.
Definitely. Boundaries are essential for protecting our time and energy. They're like the financial advisors of our time bank accounts, helping us make wise decisions about where we invest our resources.
But setting boundaries can be tough. It can feel selfish or even rude to say no.
It can, especially if we're used to people-pleasing or putting others' needs before our own.
Right.
But here's the thing. When we don't set boundaries, we're essentially teaching others that our time is invaluable. We're giving them permission to overdraw from our accounts without consequences.
So we're not just hurting ourselves, we're setting a precedent for how people treat us in the future.
Exactly. And that can lead to resentment, burnout, and strained relationships. It's like constantly lending money to someone who never pays you back. Eventually, you're gonna go broke.
So how do we get better at setting boundaries? What are some practical tips?
One thing the sources emphasize is starting small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Maybe it's saying no to one extra commitment this week, or setting aside a specific time each day where you're unavailable for anything but self-care.
It's like building that muscle, right? The no muscle. It gets stronger with each use.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're also about being clear about your needs and expectations. That might involve having honest conversations with people about your time limits, your priorities, or what you're comfortable with.
Communication is key, as always. But the sources also talk about this idea of the power of absence. It's almost counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Stepping back can actually increase our value.
It's one of those paradoxes of human nature. When we're constantly present, our contributions can become almost invisible. It's like that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, or at least a lack of appreciation.
So by creating some distance, we allow people to see what they're missing, to recognize the value we bring.
Exactly. Absence creates a void, and that void can be very revealing. It gives people a chance to experience life without our constant presence, and that can make them appreciate us more.
That reminds me of something we see in nature all the time. Think about the changing seasons. We wouldn't appreciate the vibrant beauty of spring if we didn't have the starkness of winter. The contrast makes each season more special.
That's a beautiful analogy, and it applies to relationships too. Sometimes a little distance can help us reconnect with the reasons we value those relationships in the first place. It can also give us the space we need to focus on our own growth and well-being.
And that ties back into self-respect, right?
Yeah.
Because when we prioritize our own needs, when we're willing to step back, we're sending a message that we value ourselves.
Absolutely. And that message is received loud and clear by the people around us. It changes the dynamic of our interactions. People start to realize that they can't take us for granted. They need to make an effort to earn our time and attention.
The sources also talk about silence as a statement. How does that fit into this conversation about valuing our time and cultivating self-respect?
Silence can be incredibly powerful, especially in a world that's constantly bombarded with noise and distractions. Choosing to be silent, to not react immediately, to not fill every space with words that takes discipline and self-control.
It's like we're consciously choosing to deposit into our time account by not spending energy on things that don't deserve it.
Exactly. It's a way of conserving our energy and focusing it on things that matter. And it can also be a way of asserting our boundaries. When we choose silence over engaging in an argument or reacting to someone's negativity, we're sending a clear message. I'm not going to waste my time on this.
That reminds me of a study I read about where they found that people who were comfortable with silence were often perceived as more confident and powerful.
That makes sense. Silence can convey a sense of strength and self-assurance. It shows that we're not afraid to be alone with our thoughts, that we're not desperate for attention or validation.
So silence can be a tool for cultivating self-respect.
Absolutely. It's a way of honoring our own inner space, of giving ourselves permission to just be. And it can also be a way of inviting others to respect our boundaries. When we're not constantly reacting or trying to fill the silence, we create space for deeper connection and more meaningful interactions.
The sources also talk about self-care as an act of self-respect. Why is self-care so important in this context?
Self-care is often misconstrued as being selfish or indulgent, but it's actually essential for maintaining our energy, our well-being, and our ability to show up fully in our lives. When we're depleted, we're more likely to make choices that don't serve us, choices that drain our time and energy and erode our self-respect.
So self-care is like making a deposit into our time account.
Exactly. It's an investment in our own well-being, which ultimately allows us to be more present, more productive, and more joyful in all areas of our lives.
What are some examples of self-care that people can integrate into their lives?
It really depends on the individual, but some common examples include getting enough sleep, eating nourishing foods, moving your body in ways that feel good, spending time in nature, engaging in creative activities, connecting with loved ones, and practicing mindfulness or meditation.
I love that you mentioned mindfulness. The sources talk about how being present, being mindful of how we're spending our time, is a key step in valuing it.
Absolutely. When we're mindful, we're more aware of the choices we're making, and we're more likely to choose activities that nourish us rather than drain us. It's like we're becoming more conscious consumers of our own time.
That makes sense. If we're not aware of how we're spending our time, it's easy to let it slip away on things that don't really matter.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps us break those automatic patterns and make more intentional choices about how we spend our precious time.
You know, we've talked a lot about the external aspects of valuing time, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, being mindful of our choices. But the sources also emphasize the importance of our internal dialogue. How does that factor in?
Our self-talk, the way we talk to ourselves about our time and our worth, has a huge impact on how we value and manage our time. If we're constantly telling ourselves we're not good enough, that we don't have enough time, or that we don't deserve to rest, those beliefs are going to sabotage our efforts to create a more fulfilling and balanced life.
So it's not just about the external actions we take, but also the internal beliefs we hold.
Exactly. Our thoughts and beliefs create our reality. If we want to value our time and cultivate self-respect, we need to start by examining the stories we're telling ourselves about our worthiness and our capacity for change.
That can be challenging work, but it sounds incredibly important.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering. When we become aware of the negative self-talk that's holding us back, we can start to challenge those thoughts and replace them with more supportive and empowering beliefs.
It's like we're reprogramming our internal operating system to align with our values and goals.
Exactly. And when we do that, we create a foundation for lasting change. We start to make choices that are aligned with our highest selves, and we create a life that feels more authentic, more fulfilling, and more joyful.
You know, it strikes me that valuing our time isn't just about being more productive or getting more done. It's about creating a life that feels aligned with our values, a life that feels spacious and fulfilling.
I completely agree. It's about making choices that honor who we are and what matters most to us. It's about saying yes to the things that light us up and no to the things that drain us, even if those things are expected or demanded by others.
The sources also touch on this idea of letting go of people, situations, or commitments that no longer serve us. That can be really tough, can it?
It can be incredibly challenging, especially if we're holding on to guilt or a fear of disappointing others. But sometimes letting go is the most loving and respectful thing we can do for ourselves. It's about recognizing that we deserve to be surrounded by people and experiences that support our growth and well-being.
So it's about setting boundaries, not just with others, but with ourselves. Letting go of those internal narratives that tell us we're not good enough or that we have to say yes to everything.
Exactly. It's about releasing those limiting beliefs and stepping into a new story, one where we value our time, honor our needs, and believe in our own worthiness.
The sources also talk about the importance of honoring our commitments. How does that fit into this idea of valuing our time and respecting ourselves?
Honoring our commitments is a powerful way to build self-trust and reinforce our self-respect. It's about showing up for ourselves even when it's hard, even when we'd rather stay in bed or scroll through social media. It's about demonstrating that we can be relied upon both by ourselves and by others.
So it's not just about saying no to things that drain us, but also about saying yes to the things that matter and then following through on those commitments.
Absolutely. And that consistency builds momentum. It creates a positive cycle where we feel good about ourselves for honoring our commitments, which then motivates us to make further choices that align with our values and goals.
The sources also emphasize the importance of forgiveness in cultivating self-respect. Why is that?
Forgiveness, both of ourselves and of others, is essential for releasing resentment and creating space for healing and growth. When we hold on to anger and grudges, we're essentially allowing the past to control our present and our future. We're giving our time and energy to something that no longer serves us.
So forgiveness is an act of self-respect.
It is. It's about choosing to release ourselves from the burden of the past so that we can move forward with clarity and purpose. It's about reclaiming our time and energy and investing it in things that nourish us.
It sounds like valuing our time and cultivating self-respect are intertwined journeys. They feed into each other, support each other, and ultimately help us create a life that feels more authentic and fulfilling.
I couldn't agree more. They're two sides of the same coin. When we value our time, we're essentially saying that we value ourselves. And when we respect ourselves, we naturally start making choices that reflect that worth.
And that's an ongoing process, right? That's not about achieving some perfect state of self-respect or time management, but rather about continuing to make conscious choices each day that honor who we are and what we want to create in our lives.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs and trusting that we have the wisdom and the strength to create a life that feels aligned with our values and our vision for ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway that you hope listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important message is that valuing your time and cultivating self-respect are not selfish acts. They are essential ingredients for a fulfilling and meaningful life. When we honor our time and ourselves, we create a ripple effect that positively impacts our relationships, our work, and our overall well-being.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it's a great reminder for all of us to be intentional about how we spend our time, to set boundaries that protect our energy, and to cultivate a deep sense of self-respect that guides our choices. So for those listening, I encourage you to reflect on one small step you can take today to either reclaim your time or strengthen your self-respect. It might be setting aside some time for yourself, saying no to something that drains you, or simply acknowledging your own worthiness.
Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your successes, and learn from your missteps. The most important thing is to keep moving forward one step at a time towards a life that feels authentic, joyful, and aligned with who you truly are.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast, and subscribe to my channel, like and hit that button. We'll see you next time.